Welcome to Women in Leadership Talk, where you'll hear from successful women who are empowering other women with their stories of adversity, resiliency, and success. And here is your host, Vicki Bradley, founder and CEO of Women in Leadership Empowered.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Thank you for chiming in once again to hear amazing individuals that we bring on to share their stories, their passions, the impact that they're having in the world. And today we're thrilled to have Samantha Miller with us. Samantha, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on, Vicki. Great to be here.
Well, we're thrilled to have you, and you're doing some really cool work. So I'm excited for us to get into that. And just let me take a moment and thank our audience for joining us. We know you have a choice as to what podcast you listen to, and there's lots of us out here doing this work. And we're grateful that you continue to chime in to the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. So, and as always, please do leave us a review. If this episode resonates, please share it with somebody, share it with lots of people. Let them know what you're listening to and how you're expanding your perspective. So let's jump in here. Let me tell you a little bit about Samantha so you know why I've invited her to the show. Samantha is the co-founder and CEO of Cadence OTC, where she is pioneering the effort to make combination birth control pills available over the counter. She persuaded Pfizer to sell two of the most sought after oral my goodness, I can't speak today, oral contraceptive formulations, which are preferred by the majority of the 10 million users, women, that are using the pill. And she has spent the last 7 years working closely with the FDA on the RX to OTC switch process. So I'm not going to go into a lot of technical because I want Samantha to really share her story of why are you taking on the FDA? But more importantly, let's just talk about your story and what has led you to where you are today.
Okay, happy to. My story really starts with a love of nature and a fascination with biology. And that brought me into getting 2 degrees in biology and an MBA and getting interested in the biotech industry. And I grew up in the Bay Area, so I've got like entrepreneurism in my blood, as many of us do here in the Bay Area. It's very addictive. So I started looking at small pharma, small biotech, and I realized being also kind of a social impact person in my gut that, small pharma can do projects that big pharma just can't do because big pharma is always chasing the next blockbuster. And there's really important things to do for individuals and society in the pharma industry that only small pharma can take on these gaps. So as my career developed, I started becoming more entrepreneurial. I was on the founding team for 2 startups, and then sort of a little bit later in my career, there were 2 professors from UC Berkeley who came to me. And I hadn't worked in women's health before, but I was really passionate about gender equality. And these 2 professors who were also women's health physicians came to me. They found me because I had a reputation for doing a lot of deals with big pharma. And when they told me that 45% of pregnancies in the US were unintended, I was really shocked. I had that it was that high. And as I thought about this, it really came to me that, this is such a fundamental factor suppressing women and suppressing women's, inequality and positioning. So they had the idea, and this was shared amongst many experts, many medical experts and public health experts, that having the most popular form of female contraception over the counter and just easily accessible could really bring that number down. And so I became passionate about that. I was already my plate was full at that time, but I kind of dropped everything and said, okay, let me try to help you start this company, because the key to starting it was to acquire these products, as you mentioned in your intro. So this is very unlikely to be able to buy prescription products from pharmaceutical companies unless you're another big pharma. So long story short, I was able to convince the very, good guys at Pfizer in the right position. I knew these guys, to sell me the rights as weekend work as a favor, for a very low price. And that allowed us to start the company. And I decided to really jump in and, on this project of getting the most popular birth control pill over the counter as a first in class RX to OTC switch, which is always a hard project.
Yeah. Wow. Well, you shocked me when you said 45%. So I'm assuming they had done a lot of research across the nation and I'm sure that number would probably be consistent, might even go up more, depending on, if they took all of North America into account, what that might actually look like. So I know you have a daughter, right? And two daughters. Okay. And so how did that impact your decision to take on this charge?
Yeah, I mean, I have always been really passionate about, women's leadership, and women's leadership really requires that we are able to time our pregnancies. And, I grew up pretty poor. I mean, I've got, various privileges, but I did not grow up very privileged. And I was determined to have a career that put me in a leadership position. I believe in women's leadership. And I timed my pregnancies very carefully. I actually have 3 kids, two daughters and a son. And I timed them very carefully to allow me to continue my goal of becoming financially independent. And, I don't want women to be dependent on men, because that doesn't work out in a lot of cases. So I was able to do that. I was able to continue working and have a family. And it was all because of being able to time my pregnancies. So I do have a personal sense of how important this is. Yeah. And I do have a sense that there's a lot of women that are a lot less privileged than me that really need this. And there's a lot of places in this country that do not have accessible healthcare services and do not have accessible retail services. And those are the people that we're focused on helping.
Okay. Well, and it's interesting how you bring up, being able to plan it for when you were ready for it. I think that is a very important aspect of equality.
To space them.
Yeah, exactly. And, I will have like my emerging leaders, younger women that I'm coaching or mentoring, they often are stressed by, can I have my career and have kids? And what does that mean if I, and so I think what you're describing too is also about choice, and you being able to have some sense of control over when and how this happens. And it doesn't affect men the same way, for sure. And even what you just mentioned, like if we look at divorce rate is like almost 55, 60%. And often that domestic responsibility does fall on the women.
Yeah.
And
right.
Pardon? Yes.
That's right. I mean, the number of single moms raising accidental children in this country is very high. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that's really the root of poverty in America.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point as well. So that continues to perpetuate, right? So, Okay, so we've decided to create this over-the-counter birth control pill, which is great. And you've had to take on the FDA. So what has that been like? Because I mean, especially the last like year or so with, reversal of Roe versus Wade and then like the back and forth and all the things that, have been going on politically even. How has that been taking on the drug
It's
administration?
it's been really tough. I've been working with the FDA for more than 25 years,
Okay.
and it's always tough. Sometimes it's tougher than other times,
Mhm.
depending on the FDA division that you're working on and depending on the specific project you're working on. I have to say, unfortunately, this has been my toughest project with FDA,
Okay.
and it's hard to pinpoint, all the reasons for that.
Okay, that's what I was going to
Part of
ask.
it, yeah, part of it is this division, this non-prescription division, is extremely conservative and risk averse.
Okay.
And part of it is, whenever you talk about women's health, whenever you talk about contraception, it's like has exaggerated controversy around it
Mm.
and causes people to be, exaggerated in a conservative way. Um, so I didn't fully anticipate this.
Mm.
And so it's been a really long kind of circuitous process with
Mhm.
FDA. And we've had more meetings and more interactions and more correspondence on a project is more than I've ever had on another project before. We have made a lot of progress, and now we're in the midst of trying to understand with the current administration whether they will be supportive of our final steps.
Okay.
And so that's TBD, but we're getting in contact with the new leadership, and we're hopeful that they may be supportive. In parallel, I also want to mention that we have another really important program, and that is, after the Dobbs decision, we decided that there was something that we could do to increase access to contraceptives immediately.
Hmm.
And that is to create a competitor to Plan B emergency contraceptives
Hmm.
and to make that emergency contraceptives more accessible.
Okay.
Because there are today Plan B and the Plan B private label emergency contraceptive products are only available in large corporate stores, and they are expensive,
Mm.
between $35 and $55, and they are hard to find in about 7,000 zip codes. They're actually hard to find,
Wow. Okay.
and because there's no big corporate pharmacy store.
Mm.
And so our idea was to take our emergency contraceptive and to do partnerships with convenience stores and
Mm.
to really penetrate the convenience store channel, which is, completely legal to do with an over-the-counter medicine. And that these stores are everywhere. They're open long hours,
Mhm.
and they should have urgent OTC products. They
Mhm.
all carry condoms.
Yes, I was just going to say, like, it's kind of like a no-brainer from that regard because they all do carry the basic, yeah,
They all carry condoms, often several,
variations.
variations of condoms. And then they carry Advil and Tylenol and Prilosec. And so it is a no-brainer, really. I mean, the emergency contraceptive is not very expensive to make.
Mhm.
It doesn't weigh anything. It's one tablet. It has a long shelf life. It is logical that this should be everywhere condoms are sold.
Right.
And condoms are incredibly accessible today. So that's our goal.
Okay.
And we have been successful in partnering with convenience stores, and we are already in about 15,000 convenience stores
That's progress.
across the country, and in many of these pharmacy deserts, as we call
Mhm.
them. Um, So we're excited about the impact we're making with that product. Our product is called the Morning After Pill.
Okay.
We want it to
I've
be
heard of it.
easy to identify,
Okay.
and we are also going into Kroger and other grocery store chains.
Okay. Very good. Very good. So it's interesting you brought up like women's health and how, often there is this hesitation or there's a resistance. And I think it moves beyond just, whether it's oral contraceptives, but it's also menopause. It's also a number of things that affect women specifically. And there is more, I think, information available now than there ever has been, which is awesome to see. And that's being led by women like yourself who are leading that charge on, this is an opportunity that we have to, do things in a way so that, people are planning, they are making good decisions. And let's face it, things happen, right? Like things happen. And sometimes those are the best when it's an oopsie, it can be the best. But when you can have some say and control, that I think that is a positive thing. So so all of this, back and forth with the FDA, back and forth with, because I'm sure there is a political side to this, given, the changes that have been happening. What has all this taught you so far, Samantha?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it has taught me that women's health is unreasonably controversial in general. I think that education, there is misinformation,
Okay.
and there's more misinformation in women's health than in other areas, as you point out, Vicki.
Mhm.
And so education needs to be part of every marketing campaign, must, you know, counteract misinformation and clarify the facts.
Right.
So that's something that we work on every day. How can we communicate the facts and counter misinformation in a way that's engaging and short
Mm-hmm.
and builds awareness?
Okay. Well, yes. And what you just said there, I mean, that's so important because our attention span is, we've got literally seconds and that's getting shorter and shorter. And people don't like to read so much. So it's like, how do you get that information in that education out there? And even starting with schools, right? Like schools are still teaching the way they taught probably back when we were in school. And so it's like, how do we bring that up to date so that people, understand there are different choices, that your body is your temple as well. And you get to choose, when, how, where. That becomes very empowering and very important, especially for young women, right? Like really understanding what that long-term impact is if you're not taking care of yourself and taking care of yourself in all aspects. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. And our audience is young women, and we do
Mhm.
have young women helping us to communicate with young women
Nice.
and employ a lot of social media for that purpose.
Nice, nice. So if you could do any of this over again, what would you do differently, if anything? You might not. You might say, "No, I think we've handled it just the way we should." So what would that look like?
Oh, I wish I could say that we wouldn't do anything differently, Vicki, but yeah, I've learned with the hard knocks, school of hard knocks. I think I would realize that perseverance and sustainability are really keys to
Mm,
entrepreneurship more so than I had anticipated. And then I would have thought about kind of negative scenarios and, you know, planned for negative scenarios,
mm,
and our negative scenario being the very long, very expensive FDA process on
mm,
our first in class OTC switch. And I would have, in anticipating that, I would have started our commercial program sooner.
mhm,
I would have launched our morning after pill sooner. We've also launched a pregnancy test. We have two more women's health products that we can launch OTC without being, without the gatekeeping of FDA,
Okay.
and built that commercial organization that we now have earlier to create that sustainability and be less dependent on venture funding. We would still need venture funding for the RX to OTC switch, but we would need less venture funding. And I think that that's important. The many startups, are successful early on and then burn out. And a lot of projects just require perseverance and sustainability more than you anticipate.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point. And I wasn't even thinking about from an investment perspective, but that's so true. And, like often clients that I work with that are entrepreneurs and doing startups, I will often say, keep your eye on the prize, right? What's the prize at the end? What is the impact and the intention that you're trying to create? Because it would be easy to burn out, especially when you're getting the barriers and the no's and, keep going at that. It's hard to do every day, right? Yeah, it wears on us. And so good for you. You're keeping that up and keep going at them. And sometimes, it's even education for the FDA on, here's our why. Here's why we do what we do. And just keep saying that. And hopefully it eventually sinks in. And I'm not talking just about, oral contraceptives. I'm talking about with anything that we're doing, because you're highlighting something, Samantha, very important from an entrepreneurial perspective, or even if you're in a corporate environment, having that tenacity and that resilience to keep going, it can wear you down. And so it's going back inside and remembering why you are doing what you're doing.
That's right. And that's a good point, Vicki. You need to completely remind yourself of the benefits and then continue to remind the FDA of the benefits. And because they tend to focus only on the risks.
Right. Of course. And that's human nature to a degree, right? We all tend to be a little more risk adverse. and so it's like, what if, right? Like I just had a client that I was working with that she works for a not-for-profit organization, and they're funded mostly by investors and the government. And we went through a whole government change here just recently. And we went through multiple scenarios, right? So if the government changes, we go from liberal to conservative, what does that mean? How will that impact the business? What does it mean from the initiatives specifically that are happening? And so to your point, really spending that time building in your contingency plans. If something goes awry, then how are we going to respond, not react? Because that's my world. I work with leaders on how to be more conscious about being responsive versus reactive. And it all worked out. The government ended up staying liberal, but it made her company stronger because she had gone through that. And she felt like she had, sort of a toolbox of, okay, if this happens, we know what to do. If that happens, now we know how to proceed. And so any startup, I think that's an important aspect of your planning, and even for investors, right? Like for them, spending that time and energy and money in investing in you, they want to know that you're, prepared and that you've thought through things and that you're still open to trying things. So when you look at what's happening as it pertains to healthcare and advocating for yourself and your family, because that's what I see you doing, like you're advocating for your daughters and making sure that, they have the support they need. Where do we begin? In being an advocate for ourselves and even seeing this need for something that can have a very positive impact?
Well, this kind of hits me personally because, I do have a real passion for taking responsibility for our own health.
Yeah.
and really honoring our amazing biology and being in touch with our bodies and listening to our bodies. And if there's any, and you can detect better than any physician or any hospital, you can detect if there's something changing or off, and then really pursue early diagnosis. Early diagnosis is so important for preventing more catastrophic health issues. And that's all up to us.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I certainly try to teach my kids that.
Yeah. Good for you. Good for you. Well, and that is important. And I love what you just said there about know your own biology, know when something is off, right? And don't, because we have a tendency to say, oh, it'll go away, or, oh, I'll deal with it later. And if it's niggling at you, then you owe it to yourself to check it out and make sure that, something is not right. And sometimes doctors will say, no, you're fine. But if you still feel it, you got to keep pushing it.
Get a third opinion.
Exactly. So what is keeping you up at night now, Samantha?
Oh, several things. I mean, I mentioned that with the new administration, we are actually trying to escalate the conversation to the leadership, because it is a more top-down control of FDA from the leaders of HHS and FDA.
Okay.
So we're trying to escalate the conversation and communicate with Marty Makary, the head of FDA, the new head of FDA, and his team, and even Kennedy, to really present our case for this OTC switch and all of the great work we've done in the consumer label development and the consumer testing and the positive data that we have, that this is a safe and effective product to be over the counter, and to engage their support. So that is difficult to do, to communicate to those leaders. There's a lot of blocks in place, but they seem more receptive to direct contact with industry and listening to industry.
Nice.
But that is keeping me up at night. And then the other aspects are on our commercial program is getting the right retail distribution, because there is collusion with the big corporate retailers and the more expensive reproductive health products to make sure that they have the highest margin they can have. And we are selling a more affordable product. Our product is less than half the price of Plan B. And to convince the retailers that this product is too important to not offer a lower priced version, and you'll increase your volume.
Right.
So, convincing retailers is another aspect that keeps me up at night.
I'm sure. Yeah. Just the whole business development aspect of this is, full on. Yeah. And so what about for you personally? Like what do you need from a support? You're doing a lot, advocating for your daughters, but advocating for women. What does Samantha Miller need? Loaded question, right?
Well, I mean, it's a good question, because we have to take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
And if we don't have a balance and we don't have good self-care, honestly, things break down.
Yeah.
And so I have gotten better at that over the years. And I do take the time to do things that are nurturing for me. And I've also been more honest with myself and understood better what is nurturing for me, and then taken the time to do it.
Nice. That's a key point right there, understanding what nurturing to you actually means. Awesome. Love it. So anything that we didn't cover that you feel like our audience should know about before we wrap up today?
Well, one thing is, I am all about over-the-counter reproductive health products
Mhm.
and particularly contraceptives. And I would just encourage people to start noticing when
Mm.
they go into a store, look at the women's health section, look at the health section of a convenience store. If you see condoms there, which you will, and you don't see female contraceptives, ask the store, are you carrying them? Have you thought about this?
Okay.
And is this behind the counter? Because sometimes they hide it.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Good point.
So, just the awareness and kind of bugging retailers about carrying these important women's health products.
Nice, nice. And we have audience listening from 50 some countries. So, that I think that's a very important point that you're making, no matter what part of the world you're living in. Like, are you seeing things that support women's health? And at the essence, that's what we're really talking about here, is how do we support women's health? Samantha, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing all the work that you're doing. And I my heart goes out to you because I know you're using a lot of energy for this. I'm going to call it a fight, really trying to advocate for women and reproductive rights and doing it when you want to do it. So thank you for the work you're doing. And thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a really interesting discussion.
Thank you. Thank you. And audience, thank you for joining us today. We're super grateful to have you here. And please visit us at the Women in Leadership Empowered website, where you can take our free leadership quiz. It'll give you a lot of insight as to how you're showing up as a leader. And we'd love to hear from you. So if you take the quiz, let us know. What did you learn from that? And how can we best support you? So thanks everyone for joining us today. And we will see you on the next Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Take care, everyone.
Cheers.
Thank you for joining us for WIL Talk, sponsored by Women in Leadership Empowered. To learn more about our programs, please visit www.willempowered.com. We look forward to seeing you in our community.